The sun was setting over Millbrook Bridge, casting long shadows across the weathered wooden planks that had stood for over 50 years. Below, the Clearwater River flowed with its usual gentle current, carrying fallen leaves and the occasional piece of driftwood toward the distant lake. It was the kind of peaceful evening that made people forget the world could be cruel. Harold Jennings had been coming to this same fishing spot for nearly 30 years. At 72, with silver hair and weathered hands that told stories of decades spent outdoors, he moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to appreciate every moment. His old tackle box sat beside him on the riverbank, its contents organized with the precision of a man who found comfort in familiar routines. This particular evening, Harold had chosen a spot about 50 yards downstream from the bridge, where the water deepened and the trout often gathered in the evening shadows. His fishing line disappeared into the dark water, and he settled into his folding chair with the patience that only comes with age and experience. The first sign of trouble came as voices from the bridge above, sharp and aggressive, cutting through the evening calm. Harold looked up, shielding his eyes against the setting sun. He could make out several figures on the bridge, their silhouettes moving with the restless energy of youth, but something about their body language made his stomach tighten with unease. "Come on, do it already," one voice called out, filled with cruel excitement. Harold's hand moved instinctively to his jacket pocket, where he kept his old smartphone. His daughter had insisted he carry it, though he rarely used it for anything more than calling her. Something told him he might need it tonight. On the bridge, 4 teenagers had surrounded a small German Shepherd puppy, no more than 3 months old. The little dog cowered between them, his oversized paws and ears making him appear even more vulnerable. His coat was the rich black and tan of his breed, but fear had dulled his usually bright eyes. "This is what happens to strays," sneered Jake Morrison, the apparent leader of the group. At 17, he had already developed the callous disregard for others that marked him as a bully. His friends, Tyler, Marcus, and David, had gathered around like vultures, their cell phones out, recording what they thought would be entertainment. The puppy had been wandering the streets of Millbrook for days, surviving on scraps and the occasional kindness of strangers. Animal control had been called, but the little dog had proven elusive, slipping away whenever they got close. His collar was gone, lost somewhere in his desperate search for food and shelter. "Someone's going to see us," David protested weakly, but his phone remained raised, recording. "So what?" Jake responded, his voice filled with false bravado. "It's just a mutt. Nobody cares about strays." Below, Harold heard the commotion more clearly now. The threatening voices, the frightened whimpers of an animal in distress, and his blood began to boil. He had seen enough cruelty in his lifetime to recognize it immediately. Moving as quietly as he could, Harold activated his phone's camera and pointed it toward the bridge. The zoom wasn't perfect, but he could see enough to understand what was happening. 4 teenagers, 1 small puppy, and intentions that made his heart race with anger and fear. "Please," he whispered to himself, "don't let them do what I think they're going to do." On the bridge, Jake had picked up the trembling puppy, holding him over the railing. The little dog's legs kicked frantically in the air, his small body twisting as he tried to escape. The height was significant, nearly 60 feet above the water, enough to seriously injure or kill a puppy so young. "Film this," Jake commanded his friends, who obediently raised their phones higher. The puppy's terrified whimpers carried clearly in the evening air, a sound that cut through Harold's heart like a blade. He had owned dogs all his life, had buried 3 beloved companions over the years, and the sound of an animal in distress was something he simply could not ignore. "Stop," Harold called out, his voice carrying across the water. "Leave that dog alone." The teenagers looked down, spotting the old fisherman for the first time. Instead of shame or fear, Jake's face twisted with defiance. "Mind your own business, old man," he shouted back. Harold held up his phone, making sure they could see it. "I'm recording everything. I can see your faces." For a moment, the teenagers hesitated. The reality of being filmed, of leaving evidence, seemed to penetrate their teenage invincibility. But Jake's pride had been challenged, and he wasn't about to back down in front of his friends. "Let's see you stop this," Jake yelled, and with a motion that would haunt Harold's dreams for years to come, he hurled the puppy over the railing. The little German Shepherd fell through the air, his small body tumbling helplessly. His puppy cries echoed off the water as he plummeted toward the river below. The sound was heartbreaking, a mixture of terror and confusion that no living creature should ever have to experience. Harold watched in horror as the puppy hit the water with a splash that seemed impossibly small for such a monstrous act. The teenagers above were laughing, their cruel joy audible even at this distance. Jake was high-fiving his friends, proud of his casual cruelty. But Harold wasn't watching the teenagers anymore. His eyes were fixed on the water, searching desperately for any sign of the puppy. The current was gentle, but for such a small animal, it might as well have been a raging torrent. There, about 20 feet from the impact point, a small head broke the surface. The puppy was alive, paddling frantically with his tiny paws. But he was clearly in distress. His movements were uncoordinated, and he kept disappearing beneath the surface for terrifying seconds at a time. Harold didn't hesitate. At 72, he wasn't the man he used to be, but he had been swimming in this river since childhood. He kicked off his boots, tossed his jacket aside, and waded into the water without a second thought. The river was shockingly cold, fed by mountain springs that never fully warmed even in summer. Harold gasped as the water reached his chest, but he pressed on, swimming toward the struggling puppy with strokes that were slower than they used to be but still strong enough to get him there. The puppy saw him coming and somehow seemed to understand that help was arriving. The little dog's paddling became more desperate, as if he was trying to meet Harold halfway. When Harold reached him, the puppy immediately climbed onto his back, tiny claws digging into Harold's shirt as he held on for dear life. "I've got you, boy," Harold whispered, his voice shaking with cold and emotion. "I've got you." The swim back to shore was the longest of Harold's life. The puppy's weight, though minimal, felt enormous as Harold fought against the current and his own exhaustion. His arms burned, his lungs screamed for air, and the cold water seemed to seep into his very bones. But every time he felt like giving up, he felt the puppy's small body pressed against his back, felt the rapid beating of the little heart, and found the strength to keep going. This innocent creature had suffered enough. Harold would not let him down. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Harold's feet touched the muddy bottom of the riverbank. He stood on shaking legs, the puppy still clinging to his back, and waded toward shore. Once on dry land, Harold gently pried the puppy from his back and wrapped him in his jacket. The little dog was shivering violently, his fur matted and cold, but his eyes were bright with life. He looked up at Harold with an expression that seemed to convey both gratitude and trust. "You're safe now," Harold whispered, his own voice barely audible through his chattering teeth. "You're safe." Above them, the teenagers had disappeared from the bridge, presumably fleeing the scene once they realized their actions had been witnessed and recorded. But Harold had everything he needed on his phone, every moment of their cruelty captured in digital clarity. The puppy nuzzled against Harold's chest, seeking warmth and comfort. Despite everything he had just endured, his tail gave a small wag, as if he somehow understood that the worst was over. Harold pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, his voice was steady despite his physical exhaustion. "I need to report animal cruelty," he said. "4 teenagers just threw a puppy off Millbrook Bridge. I pulled him out of the water, and I have the whole thing on video." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 20 minutes, the riverbank was crowded with police officers, animal control officers, paramedics, and even a local news crew that had heard the emergency calls on their scanner. Harold found himself wrapped in blankets while paramedics checked his vital signs, but his attention remained focused on the puppy. The little dog had been examined by the animal control officer, Dr. Sarah Martinez, who pronounced him remarkably uninjured despite his ordeal. "He's hypothermic and exhausted," Dr. Martinez explained. "But I don't see any broken bones or internal injuries." "He's incredibly lucky. He's incredibly brave," Harold corrected, looking down at the puppy who had curled up in his lap. "I've never seen anything fight so hard to survive." Detective Mike Sullivan took Harold's statement while the video evidence was uploaded to the department's servers. The footage was clear and damning, showing not only the act of cruelty but the faces of all 4 perpetrators. "This is assault on an animal," Detective Sullivan explained. "With the video evidence, we'll have no trouble pressing charges. These kids are looking at serious consequences." The story broke on the local news that very evening. The footage, edited to remove the most disturbing moments, still shocked the community. The image of Harold emerging from the river with the puppy clinging to his back became iconic, a symbol of human decency in the face of casual cruelty. By morning, the story had gone viral. News outlets across the country picked up the story of the 72-year-old hero who had risked his life to save a puppy thrown from a bridge by cruel teenagers. Social media exploded with outrage at the teenagers' actions and admiration for Harold's courage. The 4 teenagers were arrested within 48 hours. Jake Morrison, Tyler Chen, Marcus Williams, and David Foster all faced charges of animal cruelty, conspiracy, and creating a public nuisance. Their cell phone videos, initially meant to celebrate their cruelty, became evidence in their own prosecution. The legal proceedings were swift and decisive. The video evidence was overwhelming, and the public outcry was deafening. Judge Patricia Reynolds, known for her tough stance on animal cruelty cases, did not mince words during sentencing. "What you 4 young men did was not a prank," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute moral authority. "It was a deliberate act of cruelty against a defenseless animal. You showed no mercy, no compassion, and no conscience. This court will show you the same consideration you showed that puppy." Jake Morrison, as the ringleader, received the harshest sentence: 6 months in juvenile detention, 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service at local animal shelters, and a permanent ban from owning any pets. His 3 accomplices received similar but slightly lesser sentences, but the legal consequences were only part of their punishment. The viral video had made them infamous, their faces and names associated with animal cruelty across the internet. College applications were rejected, job opportunities vanished, and their families faced public shame and ostracism. "Actions have consequences," Detective Sullivan told reporters. "These young men thought they could hurt an innocent animal without anyone caring. They were wrong." Meanwhile, the puppy, now named River in honor of his miraculous survival, had found a permanent home with Harold. The old fisherman had initially planned to turn him over to animal control for adoption, but the bond formed during those terrifying moments in the water proved unbreakable. "He saved my life as much as I saved his," Harold explained to reporters. "I haven't felt this needed, this important, in years. He's given me a purpose I thought I'd lost." The transformation in both Harold and River was remarkable. The puppy, who had been a frightened stray just days before, flourished under Harold's care. He grew rapidly, his coat becoming thick and lustrous, his eyes bright with intelligence and affection. Harold, meanwhile, seemed to have found a new lease on life. His daily walks with River became longer and more adventurous. He began volunteering at the local animal shelter, sharing his story with visitors and advocating for animal welfare. The man who had been slowly fading into the quiet retirement became a local celebrity and advocate. The story of River and Harold reached Dr. Emily Watson, a veterinarian who specialized in animal psychology. She was fascinated by the bond between the elderly man and the puppy, particularly given the traumatic circumstances of their meeting. "There's something special about relationships forged in crisis," Dr. Watson explained during her visit to Harold's home. "The trust that develops when one being saves another creates a bond that's deeper than normal pet ownership. River doesn't just see Harold as his owner, he sees him as his savior." This was evident in River's behavior. The young German shepherd rarely left Harold's side, seeming to sense when the older man was tired or needed assistance. He learned to fetch Harold's medication, alert him to visitors, and even helped steady him when his balance was uncertain. 6 months after the incident, River had grown into a magnificent young dog. His intelligence was remarkable, his loyalty absolute, and his gentle nature with children and other animals made him a favorite wherever he went. But he remained wary of teenagers, particularly groups of them, a reminder of the trauma he had endured. The bridge where the incident occurred became an unlikely pilgrimage site. People came from hundreds of miles away to see the spot where cruelty had been met with compassion, where an elderly man had risked everything to save an innocent life. A small plaque was installed, reading, "In memory of courage and compassion, River and Harold, October 15th. The annual River Day was established by the Millbrook community, raising money for animal welfare organizations and recognizing acts of kindness toward animals. Harold and River always attended, though Harold grew emotional every year when he spoke about that fateful evening. "I didn't think about being a hero," he would tell audiences. "I just saw a creature in need, and I did what anyone with a heart would do. The real hero is River, who fought so hard to survive that he inspired an old man to be better than he thought he could be." Dr. Martinez, who had examined River after his rescue, became a regular visitor to Harold's home. She documented River's development, noting not just his physical growth but his emotional resilience. River shows no signs of lasting trauma from his ordeal, she reported in her notes. His capacity for trust, despite experiencing such cruelty, is remarkable. He seems to understand that Harold represents safety and love, and that understanding has allowed him to heal completely. The 4 teenagers who had thrown River from the bridge served their sentences, but their paths diverged dramatically. Jake Morrison, the ringleader, remained defiant and showed little remorse. He completed his community service at the animal shelter with obvious reluctance, learning nothing from his experience. Tyler Chen, however, was deeply affected by the public reaction to his actions. He began volunteering at animal shelters beyond his required community service and eventually changed his career plans to become a veterinarian. "I can't undo what I did," Tyler said in a rare interview 2 years later. "But I can spend the rest of my life making up for it. That puppy didn't deserve what we did to him, and Mr. Jennings didn't deserve to risk his life because of our cruelty." Marcus Williams and David Foster fell somewhere between their 2 friends. They completed their sentences and largely disappeared from public view, carrying the shame of their actions but not necessarily learning from them. The incident had far-reaching effects on animal welfare legislation. The video evidence of River's ordeal prompted lawmakers to strengthen penalties for animal cruelty and to consider the mental health impacts of such acts on both animals and witnesses. Harold became an advocate for these changes, testifying before state legislatures about the need for stronger protections for animals. His age and dignity lent weight to his words, and several states passed river laws that increased penalties for animal cruelty and required psychological evaluation for offenders. "Animals can't speak for themselves," Harold told one legislative committee. "They depend on us to protect them. When we fail in that duty, we fail as human beings." As River grew into adulthood, his bond with Harold only deepened. The German Shepherd seemed to understand that his human was aging, and he adjusted his behavior accordingly. Their walks became shorter but more frequent, their games gentler but no less joyful. Harold's daughter, Jennifer, who lived across the country, initially worried about her father taking on the responsibility of a large dog at his age. But when she visited and saw the transformation in both Harold and River, her concerns vanished. "Dad has purpose again," she told her husband. "River needs him, and he needs River. I haven't seen him this happy since Mom died." Harold's wife, Margaret, had passed away 5 years before the incident with River. The grief had slowly consumed Harold's enthusiasm for life, leaving him isolated and lonely. River had filled that void, giving Harold someone to care for and love. The relationship worked both ways. River, who had experienced abandonment and cruelty, found in Harold the unconditional love and security he had never known. The old fisherman's patience and gentleness helped the young dog overcome his fears and develop into a confident, loving companion. Dr. Watson continued to study their relationship, eventually writing a book about the therapeutic benefits of human-animal bonds formed through rescue situations. Harold and River became the central case study, their story illustrating how mutual rescue could heal both parties. "Harold saved River's life," Dr. Watson wrote, "but River saved Harold's soul." Sometimes the greatest rescues are the ones that work both ways. 3 years after the incident, Harold celebrated his 75th birthday with River at his side. The German Shepherd, now fully grown and magnificent, had become his constant companion. They had traveled together, appeared on television together, and touched countless lives with their story. The bridge where it all began remained a symbol of both human cruelty and human compassion. Visitors often saw Harold and River there, the old man teaching children about kindness to animals while River patiently allowed himself to be petted and photographed. "He's not just my dog," Harold would tell visitors. "He's my reminder that there's still good in the world. Every morning when I wake up and see his face, I remember that choosing compassion over cruelty is always the right choice." The teenagers who had thrown River from the bridge were largely forgotten, their moment of cruelty overshadowed by the greater story of rescue and redemption. But their actions had consequences that rippled far beyond their punishment, inspiring legislation, changing lives, and proving that even the worst human behavior could be overcome by the best. As Harold and River walked home from the bridge on that anniversary evening, the old man reflected on how much had changed since that terrible October night. A moment of cruelty had been transformed into a lifetime of love, A near tragedy had become a miracle, and an old man's courage had saved not just a puppy, but countless other animals through the awareness and legislation that followed. "You know what, River?" Harold said, stopping to scratch behind his dog's ears. "I think we made a pretty good team." River's tail wagged in agreement, his brown eyes reflecting the same devotion and trust that had sustained them both through their darkest moments. Together, they had proven that love really could conquer cruelty, that one act of courage could change the world, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes were the ones who mattered most. The bridge stood behind them, no longer a symbol of cruelty but a testament to the power of compassion. And somewhere in the distance, other animals in need waited for their own heroes to find them, inspired by the story of an old fisherman and a German shepherd puppy who had saved each other. Their story had become legend, but their friendship was real, enduring, and proof that in a world that could be cruel, love would always find a way to triumph. Thank you for watching this video. I would be grateful for your like. Please do not forget to subscribe so as not to miss other interesting stories. See you soon.